#1 basketball recruit in the entire country.
This is a different stratosphere.
When you're getting compared to Tracy McGrady and LeBron James, that's pretty good.
LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Cooper Flagg. So right there, he's in that category.
AJ Dybantsa, 6'9", 7'1" wingspan, can shoot the three, run an offense, block shots, harasses your team's starting point guard. ESPN's #1 recruit for the 2025 high school class, projected #1 draft pick in 2026, Gatorade Player of the Year as a freshman, Peace Jam leading scorer at age 16, recruited by Kansas, UNC, Duke. He's the best player in the country. So how did a school who's never been to a Final Four, hasn't had a draft pick in 14 years, and finished 5th in the West Coast Conference just 2 years ago, land one of the best prospects of the 21st century? My name is Sam Foster, sports editor for the Daily Universe, and this is Why Not? How BYU signed AJ Dybantsa. Historically speaking, Brigham Young University is a good basketball program. Solid, but not world-beating by any means. The team plays at the Marriott Center, which seats 19,000 people, one of the biggest college basketball venues in the country, and has a stunning backdrop of the snow-capped mountains in Provo, Utah. It's produced great talents like Sean Bradley, Danny Ainge, Jimmer Fredette, and Kresimir Ćosić. But when it comes to postseason play, BYU doesn't have much to brag about.
BYU basketball is one of the winningest programs in college basketball history.
Mitch Harper, BYU insider for KSL Sports.
No one really realizes that because they haven't delivered the high-end March success. They have the distinction of being the program with the most NCAA tournament bids without a Final Four appearance, but top 20 in wins all time. And BYU basketball has always had a high level of winning, and they won conference titles in the past from the WAC and the Mountain West back in the day. It's just been that lack of March success that's held BYU back.
Before the 2025 season, the BYU Cougars had only made it to the Sweet 16 twice since the tournament expanded to 32 teams in 1975. In both years, BYU had to have the National Player of the Year on its team to make it to the second weekend. In 1981, BYU made it to the Elite Eight with Danny Ainge leading the charge, and in 2011, Jimmer Mania took over the country when Jimmer Fredette powered the Cougars to the Sweet 16. But besides those 2 years, BYU and March aren't often brought up in the same sentence.
BYU has 2 Sweet 16s when they had the National Player of the Year. That's what it required.
Jarom Jordan, co-host of BYU Sports Nation on BYUtv.
And I want BYU to just, one of these years, we see all these magical runs by other teams. BYU's had it when you had the best player in the country. Like, you should win 2 games, right? You should win 2 games. Can't you accidentally win 2 games at some point when you're not supposed to? We're waiting for that run by BYU. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. But I get jealous every March when I go, why is that 14 seed in the Sweet 16? Why is that 12 seed in the Sweet 16? Where's BYU's? Yep, we pulled off 2 upsets and we won.
Good evening, Cougar basketball fans. Welcome courtside inside the Marriott Center on the BYU campus in Provo, Utah. Tonight, we tip off a new era of BYU basketball. The Cougars' first ever Big 12 conference game with the Cincinnati.
In 2023, BYU athletics made the jump to the Big 12, and in its first season in a power conference, the men's basketball team proved it could compete. Led by head coach Mark Pope, BYU came in 5th place in its inaugural season in the new conference and earned a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament, matching up against the 11-seeded Duquesne Dukes. But while national pundits slotted the Cougars as a sleeper underdog in the tournament, the Dukes pulled off the upset, extending the Cougars' tournament win drought to 13 years. Less than a month later, the college basketball world was shaken when a Hall of Famer resigned from his head coaching position at one of the most prestigious blue bloods in the sport.
And the biggest notable stop of the offseason probably happened last night when John Calipari reportedly is finalizing to take the head coach, or contract rather, to take the head coaching job at Arkansas, which leaves the Kentucky job open. I mean, wild. You leave Kentucky to go to another SEC school.
How does this relate to BYU? Well, then head coach Mark Pope, who had been running things in Provo since 2019, is a proud alum of Kentucky and was team captain for a Wildcat team that won a national championship in 1996. He was on the short list for the open position in Lexington. Mitch Harper.
Well, I remember in August of 2021, it was at Education Week, and which is for listeners that are not familiar, a week at BYU's campus where usually alums and maybe some members of the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints that are a little bit older, they come to campus for a week and settle into classes. In the media, there's always, for the sports media, there's always an interesting class that's held with BYU AD, now soon to be retired AD, Tom Holmoe. But then another question from the class was, what are you going to do if Mark Pope ever leaves for Kentucky? And Tom Holmoe said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something to the effect of, if he gets that opportunity, he's gone. We understand that. We've understood that since he took this job. So you knew that, with Kentucky being open, that was going to be one that Mark Pope was going to pursue.
While Pope was definitely in consideration for the job, historically great coaches like Jay Wright, Scott Drew, and Billy Donovan, all national championship winning coaches, were at the forefront. Pope, by far, was not the first option.
When was the first time that you kind of realized, like, oh, shoot, this actually might be happening?
I didn't think it would. I didn't think it'd get that far down. But when a few of those guys bowed out, Jay Wright's retired, Billy Donovan's not switching, leaving his gig. Scott Drew's going to stay at Baylor. We even talked about it on the show, like, hey, are we nervous? And I was like, no.
And then when Scott Drew ultimately turned it down, and that's when it was the doors are open, and this is on, and Mark Pope's going to probably be the next Kentucky head coach.
Pope got his dream coaching gig, and BYU was left searching for someone to come in and take the reins.
And that was a tough time for BYU because they had experienced a season, their first in the Big 12, where the number 5, fifth ranked team in the Big 12 and fifth in the standings. Successful year. Everyone thought they were going to be in the cellar of the nation's toughest conference in basketball. And then you thought all that momentum that you built just went out the window.
With Pope gone, BYU began its search for the next man up. Finding a head coach at Brigham Young University is no easy task. The school, which is owned and operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has a precedent that all athletic head coaches must be members of the church. While schools like Kentucky have its pick of the litter, BYU has a slim population of really good basketball coaches who also just happen to be members of the church that they can choose from. But lucky for them, the NBA's highest paid assistant coach was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And athletic director Tom Holmoe had been keeping tabs on his career, just in case he ever found himself in this position.
Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to formally welcome to Brigham Young University our new head men's basketball coach, Kevin Young.
Kevin Young, who was in the middle of coaching Kevin Durant and Devin Booker to the NBA playoffs with the Phoenix Suns, was regarded as one of the best assistant coaches in the NBA and was in line for a head coaching job in the near future. But after talking it over with his family, he left the pros to become the 20th head coach in school history. In his introductory press conference, Kevin Young laid out his plans for the BYU men's basketball program. In said plans, he made one statement that caught everyone off guard.
This is an amazing place, has been for a long time. What I want to do to take it to the next level is make this place the best place in college basketball to prepare young men to play in the NBA. And I think with my background, I think we're going to be able to get that done, and I really look forward to doing that.
To put it in perspective, BYU has only had 2 first-round draft picks in the last 30 years. Currently, BYU has 0 NBA players active. BYU's biggest recruiting win in the 21st century was the signing of the Lone Peak Three, which consisted of 2 high school seniors, Eric Mika and Nick Emery, and junior TJ Haas. These 3 players were all top 100 recruits from Lone Peak High School, a public school located just 17 miles north of BYU, and they dominated the competition on their way to being crowned the Max Preps National Champions of 2013. Jarom Jordan.
The Lone Peak Three felt big. All 3 were top 100 guys, 2 from one class, Eric and Nick, and then TJ was the year after. That felt like a big deal Because to get an ESPN Top 100 guy was a big deal, but to get 3 in 2 years that knew each other and were going to play together after their missions, that was kind of the moment. And then they only played 1 year together, which is crazy. And then unfortunately, Nick doesn't finish at BYU, neither does Eric. Eric leaves after his second year, and then TJ finishes out, and he's kind of the remaining guy from Lone Peak.
Mitch Harper.
The Lone Peak three, when Eric Mika, TJ Haas, Nick Emery, when that group signed and all committed, that was a big deal too. And, many people believe that they could reach Final Fours because they'd go into Chicago and defeat the best high school, Simeon High School. Jalil Okafor was on that team, and they would just mow through those teams. And you thought, man, those guys are going to BYU. They could do some incredible stuff.
Between different starting years, LDS missions, Eric Mika going to the draft, and Nick Emery not finishing his college career at BYU, the trio only played one full season together. They had won a national championship at a Utah public high school, but couldn't get a single tournament victory at BYU.
So Kevin Young gets hired, and then in his first introductory press conference, the big statement that kind of caught everyone's attention was, we want to make BYU into an NBA pipeline. When he says that, do you actually believe that he can do that? Or what's going through your mind when he says such a kind of outlandish claim at the time?
I thought to myself, I remember sitting in the Marriott Center floor when he said that, and I thought, that's bold.
I thought it was an ambitious statement.
But Young wasn't just making empty statements. Right away, he brought back team leaders Richie Saunders and Dallin Hall, who had entered the transfer portal in the days following Mark Pope's departure towards Kentucky. He completely revamped the coaching staff, bringing in guys with heavy NBA ties.
He brings in the nutritionist and a video guy from the Phoenix Suns. He keeps the strength and conditioning guy from the Bucks. He keeps the mental strength guy from the Bucks and Cavs. There's no team in America that has the NBA experience that this staff has wire to wire. You may have a couple coaches who have been in the NBA longer or whatever. He pulled a G League head coach to be an assistant at BYU and Will Voigt. It's pretty incredible.
He also brought on board his brother, Justin, who had over 20 years of experience in basketball recruiting, working for NBADraft.net, Rivals.com, Yahoo Sports, and starting his own company, Hoops Scene. He was officially named the BYU men's basketball director of recruiting in October.
Obviously, it's funny, he and I both have worked in basketball our whole careers, but we've never been in the same vertical for basketball. He's been on the pro side, I've been on the college, high school side, but we've never really intersected.
But the moment that everybody knew Kevin Young meant business was in late May, when it was announced that Russian prospect Yegor Demin decided to leave Real Madrid to play one season of college basketball in Provo before heading off to the NBA draft, where he would likely be selected in the lottery. This was the biggest signed recruit in BYU basketball history.
That was a real signal that, Kevin Young, prospects that you never thought BYU would ever wear a BYU jersey could be playing at BYU in the Big 12, in the Marriott Center. It was big time stuff to get Yegor Demin, who Illinois was in the mix for him. And the thing is too is that Kevin Young didn't have necessarily this just long-standing relationship either. I think that's what was so noteworthy here. This wasn't one of those deals where Kevin Young's known about Yegor since he was a young kid. No, this was where Kevin Young's backgrounds, his accolades, once he got the chance to really get into the mix and get BYU in the conversation for Yegor, it was just a no-brainer for him, for Yegor Demin. And I think that's just what kind of spoke volumes about this, and that Kevin Young is just a very likable guy, and he can be a closer too, and get prospects that you never thought BYU would get. So that was the first big signal that something special was happening on the recruiting trail for BYU.
Young then got the commitment of Cannon Catchings, a 4-star forward with high-level athleticism who played at Overtime Elite. Catchings was BYU's second highest recruit ever, right behind Yegor Demin. People all around the world were getting word of what was happening along the Wasatch Front, and one high school player was very intrigued. AJ Dybantsa, the #1 high school prospect in the class of 2025, reached out to Young and company, curious as to what all the buzz was about in Provo. The best high school player in the country reached out to BYU first, not the other way around.
And AJ's family contacted Kevin first, you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. Say, hey, we'd love to meet you. We're here in Utah. Heard a lot of great things about you from, AJ's really close with Kevin Durant and Chris Paul and a lot of these guys in the NBA. And, Kevin and Chris Paul are really, really close. And so, I'm sure Chris, was like, hey, my guy's now at BYU. You need to get to know him. I mean, I'm just assuming that was the case.
What were the conversations like between you guys and AJ's camp?
Honestly, in recruiting, you just kind of get to know people. You know what I mean? Just like you're just sitting down at the table, just kind of breaking bread and just getting to know people and who they are, your family makeup, what you like, what you don't like, what movie you liked last. I mean, and then really, like when Kevin's really good, when he gets in his office and he turns on the film and he really starts to break things down, I mean, it's organic. So I don't know if there was anything specific other than just an organic process of everybody just trying to get to know each other on that level. And then when it was time to really like break down basketball, that part was easy, honestly, because there was a relationship that was established, like a trust that was kind of gained over time, not just for AJ to us, but us to their family as well.
So what did Kevin Young learn about AJ in those early discussions? Paul Biancardi, director of boys high school basketball recruiting at ESPN.
Well, if you were drawing up a picture of an NBA prospect, let's start there, it would look like him. I saw Tracy McGrady in high school. I saw LeBron in high school. He has their athletic ability at the same stage. He's not just an athlete, he's a basketball player. So his skill level to score, finish plays, number one, put the ball on the deck, get to the rim, number two, the pull-up jump shot, three, the emerging three-point shot is four. Basketball IQ is certainly coming about. So he understands, how to execute a play, but he also has the uncommon traits. He's an exceptionally hard worker. He's been dedicated, his whole life to the sport, and he's done it early in the morning. He's done it at home. He's done it on the road. He did it during COVID. He's just ingrained with being a hard worker, and that came from his dad, and his mom.
Dybantsa, a native of Brockton, Massachusetts, has been on the radars of scouts everywhere since his freshman year of high school when he was named the Massachusetts Gatorade Player of the Year.
Yeah, well, the Gatorade award is very prestigious because it combines the athletic ability of your sport, your grade point average, and community service. And AJ, through his parents, has done community service. A lot of high school kids don't do community service on their own. They're taught that by their parents to do it, to understand the meaning of it, to, show them how they should serve the community. So again, his parents have done a wonderful job raising him just as a person in society.
Dybantsa's father, who is Congolese, and his mother, who is Jamaican, were both pivotal in his upbringing and his recruitment. For AJ's senior season, he moved to Hurricane, a small town in southern Utah, to play for a brand new school, Utah Prep. Mitch Harper was able to tour Utah Prep's campus and facilities last summer.
It's in the middle of nowhere. I saw it in August of 2024, just middle of nowhere. There was a football field where in the back of the school where he did his Red Bull tease video, first commitment. I saw that field. The gym, basically, 3 sets of bleachers, rows, metal bleachers on the sidelines, and then no seating behind the hoops, just walls. None of the games are played in that little gym in that Utah Prep campus, but they've got a eating area, they've got classrooms. Everything else is just like a typical school. But the basketball facility is not great, and that's why they play a national schedule that's pretty much away from campus. But it was also noteworthy too, the talent on that team at Utah Prep. There was Anthony Falesi. There were other prospects on that team that were high level prospects, 4 or 5 star guys that BYU is pursuing. Falesi being one for the 2026 cycle. And, so you're seeing a good competitive look here of Dybantsa, and it was kind of a scrimmage, inter-squad deal. And, there was a moment where Falesi, got a bucket over Dybantsa, and Dybantsa instantly flipped a switch and just kicked his competitiveness up 5 gears. And you just saw in a scrimmage that had no significance on anything in the middle of August, this guy just turns on this competitive gear that he's just going to now mow through everyone and just be relentless on both ends of the floor. And just, he does not want to lose in anything. It really shined on that scrimmage in August. And impressive talent, though. I mean, and he did a dunk contest too for the fans. And, that was pretty fun. And he had a couple of impressive dunks. I'm just thinking, this is incredible stuff here. I mean, this is the type of recruit that I'm just not used to seeing in person. This is what it feels like to see a number one guy who's still got tons of potential. I think that's what's interesting about Dybantsa too, is that he's got so much room to grow still in his game with his 3-point shooting, with just everything. And he understands that too. I mean, I think he's probably the toughest critic on himself, and he's always looking to get better every single time he takes the court. And he's a fascinating prospect to watch. And he is as good as I've ever seen in person. I mean, next level for sure.
In his first unofficial visit to BYU's campus in June, Dybantsa told Mitch Harper that 95% of the conversations were about the NBA. Quote, "He knows my goal is a league, so that was his motto. He can get me there since he knows what it takes."
When he had an unofficial visit to BYU, and for my background, talking to recruits over the years that are interested in BYU, and me being someone who covers BYU, when recruits want to talk to me, it kind of is an indirect, unspoken, like they are interested in BYU. And when AJ Dybantsa's camp, wanted to meet me in person at KSL Broadcast House, it was kind of very noteworthy to me that right after his unofficial visit that same day, he wanted to meet with me and talk about it. And we laid down an interview and podcast and spoke about that. But it was, and then getting to meet him for the first time, it was very telling that this is not he's just visiting BYU because now he's at Utah Prep and, it's in the same state, even though it's still 4 hours away, but it's not just some courtesy visit. Like, this is real. BYU is going to be in the mix for this guy, and they're going to be one of the teams to potentially beat for AJ Dybantsa. And it just, once you kind of, digest that, I think for many in college basketball and recruiting, just you say number one overall recruit in BYU, that doesn't add up, but it was very real. And after that unofficial visit is when it was real to me that BYU was going to be heavily involved for the recruitment of AJ Dybantsa.
Right. It's significant that AJ would even consider BYU.
Jarom Jordan.
But yeah, it's significant because some of the higher profile athletes that BYU's been in the mix for, they were all members of the church. BYU's not gotten a super high profile member of another faith or not a member of this faith before to this degree. And so it's significant and it's awesome. And it shows that this is not your grandma's BYU.
If you look at BYU's best all-time basketball recruits before Kevin Young, Sean Bradley, Devin Durant, the Lone Peak Three, Tyler Haws, Trent Plaisted, Lee Cummard, they all have a lot in common. They are all white, American, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and if they're not from Utah, they're from the western half of the United States. Historically speaking, Black, American, non-members do not end up playing basketball at BYU. The fact that AJ, who has no connection to the school, was heavily considering BYU was historic.
I just think that, AJ Dybantsa is also looking at this too from just a basketball perspective and also the family environment, sure, that he noted, but he looked at this and said, I don't care that they're owned and operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't care that it's primarily a white student body. This is a place that's going to get me ready for what my ultimate goal is, and that's the NBA. And I've got a coach who worked with my mentor, a guy that I love in Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant vouched for this guy and said he's awesome. You got to play for him. And, Chris Paul's, noted how good Kevin Young is. So I just think that it's a very mature outlook from AJ Dybantsa, where I think a lot of young people in recruiting, they probably look at it and think, even if it makes all the sense in the world to go play for a guy like Kevin Young, that can be a little bit intimidating, whereas Dybantsa is very mature and he acts like a pro already. And so that to me is, I think, the biggest thing in all this is that Dybantsa he looks at it from a standpoint of this is going to be the best place to develop for the NBA.
By the start of Dybantsa's senior season, he had narrowed his choices to 6 schools: Blue Bloods, UNC, Duke, and Kansas; Alabama, who was fresh off of its first Final Four appearance in 2024; Big 12 members Kansas State; and BYU. The Cougars had a chance. In October, Dybantsa went on his first official visit to BYU, where he talked a lot of ball with Kevin Young and met some players at practice. But the highlight of the trip was going to the BYU versus Arizona football game at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. The game could not have gone any better for BYU's chances. Dybantsa met former Cougar great Steve Young, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Puka Nacua, who was fresh off of one of the greatest rookie receiving seasons in NFL history. The 17th ranked Cougars routed Arizona 41-17 in a nationally televised Big 12 game. But while the on-the-field product was enticing for the recruit, the most significant part of the game was when AJ walked over to BYU student section and heard this. BYU fans showered AJ with cheers in his first interaction with the student body. His first visit could not have gone any better. But AJ isn't coming to BYU to watch football games. He's coming to play basketball. And when it comes to that, Justin Young has a simple message to recruits. Just come and see.
My whole thing is just come and see what it's about. And I think you'll kind of understand. I know that's how I was. I've never been to a game. I worked in basketball my whole career. The first time I ever went to a game at the Marriott Center was this season when I was on staff. And so I needed to see it for myself to get it, you know what I mean? And stand there, on the bench and you just look up and you're looking around holy crap, this is phenomenal. This is an NBA arena that goes hard, man. It's pretty unique. And so when I say come and see it, I mean exactly just that. Come sit down in Kevin's office and talk to him. And I think you'll be surprised on how real that he is. There's not this, I'm not saying that coaches do this, but there's not a recruiting facade that you get. It's pretty straight up. Kevin's the same he is with me as he would be for, the number one player in the country, to the plumber, to, Brad Pitt, whoever it may be, right? Kevin's going to be the same guy no matter who he talks to. And our staff, I think, is the same way. And our team is the same way. And so when I say come see it, just come see what we're about. And I think once you get in there, you really get in the weeds. You see the NBA background with the strength and conditioning, the NBA background with the mental coach, the NBA background with our food and nutrition, the NBA background on our analytics. You come and you see it in all these different categories of how we operate, and you see that for yourself, and you see yourself in this, if you're part of the team and you see that, it's hard to deny that, okay, now I get it. Now I understand why these players that maybe haven't considered BYU in years past are saying, heck yeah, I want to be a part of that.
On December 9th, Dybantsa announced that he would go to ESPN's First Take the next day to make his decision. In front of millions of viewers, he was about to drastically change 2025's college basketball landscape. But before we get to that, I've left out something pretty crucial that must be brought up when we are talking about BYU men's basketball, recruiting, and AJ Dybantsa. On February 5th, 2025, ESPN published an article by writer Myron Metcalf titled, "How BYU and its big money boosters are going all in on men's basketball." In the article, Metcalf highlighted a claim by Paul Lillienquist, CEO of Focus Services and a big-time donor to the BYU men's basketball program, that went viral among the college athletic scene. "You're not going to outbid us," Lillienquist said. For years, collegiate athletes were barred from using their name, image, and likeness for financial gain. But all that changed in 2021 during the historic NCAA versus Alston Supreme Court case. Now, NIL is at the forefront of college athletics, and if your university can't get on board, then it will be left behind. Kevin Young knew that to make BYU the NBA pipeline that he talked about, he would need to get BYU's boosters on board.
How did you guys get those boosters on board with BYU basketball?
It wasn't that hard, to be honest with you. I think people saw the vision, and I think they knew, like, hey, listen, we've got a guy. Kevin's a bit of an anomaly, right? Like he had opportunities in the NBA to be a head coach, and Kevin was pretty clear, like, I'm going to come to BYU. I want to make sure I've got the players that want to compete at the high level. And I think the support was there, and they were willing. They wanted to do that. They aligned with that as well. And they said, heck yeah, like, if you feel like you can go do that, we want to support you in that. But again, I think a lot of that credit's already, been set in place by the administration, by the collective. They've done a really good job of making that a healthy ecosystem to be able to go do that, where it was really kind of a plug-and-play situation.
We don't have a specific number on what BYU offered AJ Dybantsa. Rumors of $7 million have been shot down by AJ's camp. Dybantsa's father said that BYU wasn't the outright highest bidder, but that BYU was on par with the other top schools.
For many people that feel like, college sports has lost its way, I disagree, because if you're a school like a BYU that's willing to commit resources and, chase championships and success, you can do that now. Before, BYU operated in a world where they wanted to do right by the rules, and everything still right now is above board. But before, BYU was losing players for 8 or 9 games due to paperwork, and the NCAA suspending Yoli Childs over that. Those are the sort of things where BYU was at such a disadvantage because they were trying to operate above board. And now everything that maybe was, behind the scenes, and previous coaches that led BYU in the past knew that, yeah, they probably lost this guy because he got paid. Well, now they can pay.
I don't know if we will ever know the exact number that AJ Dybantsa is receiving from BYU, but from everyone that I have talked to, everything that I have read and seen, I think it hovers around the $5 to $6 million range. Take that for what it's worth. That's just my estimate. December 10th, 2024. AJ Dybantsa goes on First Take with Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharp, and Molly Karam. His final 4 schools are Kansas, UNC, Alabama, and BYU.
And so when you get to First Take, there was buzz that BYU was the favorite, but still the drama of, the social media and the recruiting sites noting that, his dad was at the North Carolina game, Alabama assistant coaches were still visiting him up until about a week prior to that commitment date. So it was a little bit very interesting. But, BYU always had a strong impression on him, and I felt that BYU had a great shot at getting him, because these type of recruits, though, you never know, because, in my experience covering BYU recruiting over the years, it's never been a prospect to this level. It's never been a guy of this magnitude where Nike is saying the future is now. This is AJ Dybantsa. Where brands like Red Bull are involved with this type of prospect. And so, there's no precedent as far as, could there be an 11th hour switch, where he goes somewhere else? I think everything was on the table.
With the world watching, AJ unzipped his jacket to reveal a royal blue shirt with the BYU basketball logo and Nike symbol, and threw on a royal blue dad hat with a vintage Y logo and a cougar on top. The First Take panel was a little surprised. It was clear they did not think that BYU was a realistic choice. At one point, Stephen A. Smith said that he thought Dybantsa would choose UNC because of the rivalry with Duke. It's safe to say they did not prepare for the possibility of him going to Provo.
And then he goes on First Take, and it's BYU, and it's just like one of these all-time moments in BYU history. Stephen Smith is forced to talk about BYU basketball, which was great.
When he was saying, I would have thought you'd go to, North Carolina because of the North Carolina-Duke rivalry. I'm thinking, these recruits are not picking based on rivalries. That's just not how this is going down, Stephen A.
Shortly after the show, it was revealed that AJ Dybantsa had already signed with BYU during the early signing period. the BYU Athletic Department kept it under wraps for 2 whole weeks without news getting out. Justin Young.
How did you guys keep that under wraps for so long?
Question of the year, I don't know. I mean, honestly, we should be hired by the government to keep government secrets. I think we did such a good job, everybody involved. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I'll go to the grave not knowing how that never got out. It was pretty good.
While most of the country was asking why AJ signed with BYU, the Youngs were asking why not.
You know, like kind of our whole family kind of believes like this whole idea of why not? You know what I mean? Like, why can't we go do this? And so when you look at the BYU situation, it was really the perfect storm of timing with moving to the Big 12. So regardless of who your coach is, moving from the WCC to the Big 12, you really have to make a uptick in talent, just the physicality, the size, the athleticism. And so when you're moving to that level of basketball, I think that was already going to be in motion. I think BYU kind of accepted that when they made the decision to move to the Big 12, not just for football, but for all the sports. It's just a different type of athlete, number one. Number two, I think obviously there's no denying how much the support of collective and NIL really comes into play. And so the timing of that is that's starting to really kind of mature and grow legs, and different schools adopting different philosophies and how to utilize that. I think you have a fan base that, like BYU, that's successful, that I think has been chomping at the bit to prove themselves as a real player in college athletics, and to be able to do that above the table in a frame that it's set up with the NIL, and to support the student athletes that, you know, they deserve. It was a part of that. And then you tie that all together, you get a guy like Kevin. His whole approach was, listen, I'm not going to leave the NBA to not be able to coach the highest level of players. So I want to be able to bring those guys to Provo. And I think all those 3 points that I talked about all tied in perfectly to the vision that Kevin had for it, and was to go out there and set that forth. And so when you look at all that, when the rules allow you to go do that, again, it goes back to this whole notion of why not? Why can't we go do this?
In just 1 year of coaching at BYU, Kevin Young has reached the school's 3rd Sweet 16 ever, will produce the school's first draft pick in 14 years this June, and has signed the top 4 recruits for BYU basketball this century, none higher than AJ Dybantsa. AJ has since been to multiple BYU men's basketball games at the Marriott Center. On the March 1st victory against West Virginia, he could be seen going into the student section with students chanting his name and reaching out to him like he was a member of the Beatles. AJ and his parents flew to Newark, New Jersey to watch BYU take on Alabama in the Sweet 16 last March. Everywhere AJ goes, he can be seen rocking BYU gear, and sometimes that still takes some getting used to. How a school with only 6 first-round draft picks in the NBA's 77-year history has revamped the entire culture, play, and opinion of its program in less than a year is truly remarkable. As long as Kevin Young has the reins in Provo, don't expect BYU's name to go away anytime soon. This has been Why Not? How BYU signed AJ Dybantsa. My name is Sam Foster, and you can find more of my work at dailyuniversesports.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Sam Foster, but the T in Foster is a 1. That's at SAMFOS1ER. Special thanks to BYUtv and BYURadio for letting me use soundbites from their programming. Thank you to Jarom Jordan. You can watch him every weekday at 12 Eastern on BYUtv and find him on Twitter at Jarom Jordan. Thanks to Mitch Harper. You can find more of his work on his Twitter at Mitch_Harper and on KSLSports.com. And lastly, thanks to Paul Biancardi over at ESPN and Justin Young with BYU men's basketball. Thanks for listening.